Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. So today is a special webinar because we have a guest, which is always nice, which is Lukas from LOOKSLIKEFILM. We'll say hi to Lukas in a second. Before we get to Lukas, just a couple of housekeeping things that we need to think about. As usual, today we have a maximum of 1 hour. It might be half an hour, it might be 40 minutes, it might be 1 hour. Let's just see how we go. That largely depends on your questions. So you are very welcome to join in the chat and submit your questions. And we are recording this as well, so don't worry if you miss anything. So if you want to chat, most of you have discovered the chat room by now. Just be aware that is public. Everything you write there can be seen by everyone else, so be nice to each other, which I'm sure you will. If you want to ask a question, it's better if you put it in the Q&A tab, and then that's just easier to sort of separate that out from the chat for myself and Lukas. But if you're not interested in chatting or asking questions, that's totally fine. You can hide that side panel just with the icons in the top right, and that gives you a little bit more space on screen. So I think now it's time to let's find Lukas and bring him up on screen. So we should be able to see Lukas now. Hi Lukas, thanks for joining us.
Hey David, nice to meet you.
Likewise. And what we're going to do today, perhaps you can just explain a little bit about what we're going to look at, which is the Reverie, have I said that right? Reverie Styles for Capture One.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what we're going to be looking at. And you'll take us through sort of a little bit on how they were created without giving away your secrets, of course.
Okay.
And the best way to apply them to various images in Capture One as well. So that's our goal for today, pretty much.
Perfect.
All right. So I'm going to put your screen up so everyone can see that and hide you and me. So now we're looking at your Capture One screen. So I shall leave it over to you, and then I'll interrupt you every now and then if we have some questions pop up. But let's start with just a little bit of background on the styles and the kind of different looks that you can get from them.
Sure. The Reverie Style Set is basically, I made this set like in the past year, and I switched from Lightroom to Capture One, and I just like looked for a solution to have like a quicker edit workflow.
Okay.
As I used my own presets back in Lightroom, and so the Reverie styles are not the same, but they are kind of similar. So they're like basically in the same, I would say, atmosphere. They have the same mood that my Lightroom stuff has.
Okay.
And but since Capture One works differently and has different tools that also work differently, they are not exactly the same.
No, and that's a good point. It's impossible to, I guess, make the exact same looks between Lightroom and Capture One. I mean, you could, but as you say, they're two different processing engines. So I think what you did starting from scratch makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I just like the tones way better in Capture One.
Yeah.
Sorry, my voice is a little bit gone. Sorry.
Mine too. Don't worry.
Yeah, and it's just a nicer workflow, I would say.
Yeah.
So maybe I can explain a bit like how the presets work and like how they're meant to be used.
Yes, that would be great.
So there's a total of 8 presets in here. So you've got 4 color ones and 4 black and white ones.
Okay.
So they all have different reasons to be used, but there are cases where you can basically use them on every single image. So the alpha will always be the main the go-to one, I would say.
Okay.
That's also the one that I would use when I edit the wedding in most cases, since I try to shoot in the same light as often as possible, and I know that this will give me the best results. The beta one is basically a different version of the alpha one that's a little bit slightly warmer, and that just adds more warmth to highlights and shadows. Just warm up the image a bit. The delta one is basically a clear or classic look that I would say, which is different from the first two ones. And gamma is meant to be used mostly for sunsets, sunrises, basically images that have or tend to have a lot of sun.
Okay.
And which I will show in a bit. But as I said, you can sometimes use all of these in different settings as well.
That's good, and that's a good thing to point out with styles, because quite often with a lot of style packs, and as we were chatting before we came on, I really like the fact that there's only 8 and not like 100, because
Yep.
then you've got 8 quality ones, not 100 sort of tiny variations. And trying these myself, it's been great to see that they're applicable on all kinds of photos, not just a few that they work on, which is often an issue with styles as well.
Yeah, so another thing, so these are meant to be used mostly for wedding images. That's how I built them. That's how I use them as well. So basically wedding images or portraits. These are not the typical light and airy presets that I would say, or styles that I would say. These are definitely more moodier or darker. And that's how they also should be used. And they also are pretty warm.
Okay.
And because my editing style is also pretty warm. And so like once you edit with these styles, you can bump up the white balance pretty much pretty high, and it would still work, which I can show in these images if you guys want to.
Yeah, definitely.
So let me just start maybe just showcase like every single preset one more time. So I like this image a lot because it basically has a lot of dark spots and bright spots, and also like colors like red, green, and also blues in the corners. So you guys can see like an overall view, like what the preset does to the image.
Yep.
And as I told you, so the way that I edit normally is I apply the preset first, the style first, sorry, still in Lightroom mood. And then what I do then is basically change the white balance. So as I told you guys, you can like warm up images quite a bit with these.
Yeah. And white balance is not part of the style, is it? So it's not like...
It's not. So I had it in there at first, but it was kind of hard to create white balance styles.
Yeah.
Because white balance is so different, and so I tried to make them and ended up doing like certain Kelvin styles, but it always ended up looking worse than it was with the original raw file and the in-camera white balance.
Yeah.
That's why I removed it.
Yeah, I think it just doesn't make it particularly applicable for multi-image use then. As soon as you try and put a white balance in a style, it might look good on 10 images, but then breaks down on others.
Exactly. So for these images, so as I told you, I would always pick the alpha one first. That's my main go-to one. And if that doesn't work, I would like try to play with the different other ones. So what we also have in here are soft versions of the presets.
Okay.
So basically, each color preset has a softer version, as you can see. It basically just gives you like crushed blacks and like faded highlights, and that's just something for people to play around with it. That's not like everyday use or every image use, but sometimes it works. So you can also check these out, and you can also change highlights or shadows, which will also give a total different effect when I apply these.
So so the cool highlights and cool shadows, that's to use in combination with one of the other styles.
Exactly. Yeah. So it basically like keep the tones alive, but will just go into the shadows. As you can see, it turns blue.
Right.
In the shadows and in the highlights here, the same stuff. The dress and his shirt tend to be a bit more bluish, but it's also for different settings, and it's also something that you can play around with. It's nothing that you have to use in every single image,
right? And
it's nothing that I use in every single image. So I try to keep it simple, just applying the preset, changing the white balance, maybe like play with exposure and contrast to get it right, and then I would add grain in the end. So I like myself some grain, so I would always go for medium grain, just to give it that slightly more filmic look.
Yeah.
Just to make the image look, well, perfect for me in my mind.
I know we spend all this money on low noise cameras and everything, and then we put grain back in again. But there we go.
Exactly. Yeah, so maybe I can show you guys the black and white styles as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So these are all different as well. let me just remove these. So as you can see, they have all a different look. Some are more contrasty, some are more faded, and it's just like same as with the color ones. The Omega in this case would be my go-to one, which is basically a nice contrasty black and white look.
Looks great.
And then you can go and play around if you want more faded looks with these ones, and the Lambda one as well. So yeah, that's basically a quick run of the presets.
Nice, simple. So yeah, let's see some edits, I guess.
Sure.
And don't forget, for the people out there, if you have any questions, whether that's on Reverie Styles or how to use styles, feel free to put them in the Q&A as well.
Okay, so I will try to just like edit every single image in here.
Yeah.
And maybe just check a different style right now. So we can use the better one right now.
Okay.
Which, as I told you, has more is a warmer look and has like reds in the shadows, as you can see.
Yeah.
And which is also nice sometimes. I think it works in this image.
Yeah, it's pretty much done.
It's pretty much done. Yeah. I mean, I always try to get it right in camera as much as possible. So, and I would maybe just warm it up a slightly bit in here, and then maybe just add the grain in the end to get it right.
Yeah.
I think that's
great.
Pretty much.
Yeah, nice.
A finished image.
Yeah.
So, as you can see, it's definitely warmer than it was, but that's just how I edit. And of course, you can also play around with colder edits if you want to edit colder. That's no problem as well. Let's just see how the black and whites ones would work on this one. Oh, let me just clear that.
Yeah, I have to say I really like the first black and white style Omega, isn't it? It works super nice on everything, which is good.
Yeah, and I love the black and white so much more than the Lightroom ones. It's just insane. I don't know what you guys are doing with the software, but it's it's something else, and especially the grain looks like so organic.
Yeah.
And
that's why the nerdy scientific explanation on the grain tool is that most applications, when they emulate grain, it's usually just by overlaying a sort of grain opacity, if you like, from a scan from a piece of film. But grain in film doesn't behave like that. It varies between shadows, midtones and highlights. So the grain in Capture One is actually trying to emulate what film did and interact with the underlying image, if you like. So that's probably why it looks more organic. So it's good that you spotted that.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe you can have a look at the soft versions for this image as well, because I think like with this image, basically every style can work, in my mind.
Yeah.
Like nothing that looks too odd for me. So you've got the main one. This is the soft version, of course. And so I also like the classic Delta one, which is more like a clean look. That also works for some people, I guess. But I would also always prefer the warmer edit, for sure. Let's just head into the next one. So what some of you will notice when you guys use these styles, so when you apply them, like your image, if you have like a pretty bright image, it will end up being way brighter than you thought.
Okay.
As you can see.
Yeah. So it's like lifting the midtones a little.
Exactly. So I would always like try to play around with exposure a bit, and just like maybe bring these down as well, and then warm it up again. I think that looks pretty cool. Maybe just increase a bit of contrast. Also the contrast tool is also so nice because the skin tones are not really affected when I change the contrast. So that was a big thing for me when I changed, because the contrast tool on Lightroom, it's just so different, and it kind of changes everything about the entire image, which does not happen here.
Yeah, it's super nice.
Okay, let's take this one here. So for this one, as I told you, you can always try to use the gamma one, which is meant to be used for sunrise or sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And if I apply the other ones, as you can see, it's kind of a little bit blown out and doesn't look too right.
Right.
And the skin tones are also different. Like whereas the skin tones in the first three are like more reddish, it kind of tends to be more orangey for the gamma one. And so I would apply the preset. I love to add more contrast when there's like backlit images, and maybe even like warm up the images a bit again, just to give it that soft, dreamy look.
And the tools that you're using, is that pretty much what you get by with on for editing? So you have the styles, white balance, exposure, high dynamic range, and you accomplish pretty much everything with those?
Exactly. Yeah, I try to like use these as for the majority of the part. If I feel it's not enough, I might also like go further down into the curves and then the color editor. But usually, like these should do for my workflow.
Yep.
And
which helps for speed as well, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. So and so the thing is, like, I love shooting, but editing is not my like main thing that I would say, not preferred.
Right.
And but it's definitely a breeze when you can edit quicker and use less tools.
Definitely.
Which is always the thing that you should do.
Yes.
Perfect. Let's take the next one.
So this one looks a little bit. Is it slightly underexposed or?
It is. It is. Yeah. Let's just try to take the delta one for the clean look. So in this case, I would bring up the exposure a bit, just to make it look right. I think that's fine for me.
Yep.
And I would always add some warmth to make it a little bit more, punchy, I would say.
Very nice.
So it works for this one. We can check out the other ones as well. So once you like nail down these settings, you can go back up and just like change.
Okay.
The styles and see like if maybe you can just change to alpha,
right?
And that works better for you.
Well, that's nice because so if you've nailed it for delta or something, and then you think actually go to alpha, you then pretty much stay static with the other adjustments. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's pretty cool. So let's take the next one. This is a pretty nice soft overcast light. So same thing that I said before. If it's too bright of an image, apply the preset, change the contrast a bit, and maybe just adjust the exposure and de-highlight a tiny bit, and then warm it up in the end again.
Easy.
So probably something like this. Let's try the black and white ones for this one too. Just to check it out, yeah.
Yeah, I really like the Amiga style. I've been using that myself a lot, actually.
I kind of like the Omicron one for this one.
Yeah.
Not the biggest fan of too much faded highlights, but it kind of works for, I think, for these cloudy soft settings.
Yeah.
Kind of works.
Oh, good question from Nadia. And I can answer this, or you can answer it. And actually, you can tell us if it's a technique you can use. But they're asking if you'd like to do smaller adjustments or like local adjustments. Is that possible? And the answer is yes. It's just a little bit different to Lightroom. Lightroom, I guess, works on the principle of adjustment brushes, whereas Capture One is closer to using more like layers in Photoshop. So whilst I would say that it's similar to what you can do in Capture One, I think it's more powerful because having the ability to work in different layers and different opacities on each layers kind of makes every tool that little bit more flexible.
Yeah, so let's just take this one here right now. So this looks already fine for me as a raw file. And so like this is an image for me that like works with basically every single style.
Everything.
It kind of changes the looks, of course, but it still works. It's just like preference, like what you prefer. Maybe the red shadows in this one are not the best solution. It kind of flattens the image. And yeah, alpha looks fine. Delta is also fine in this case. As you can see, like alpha and delta, like the greens are very different.
Yeah.
So delta is definitely like more the classic, I would say, like more filmy look.
Right.
In terms of greens. And gamma one also kind of works for this one here.
Yeah, looks good. And here's it was a question I was about to ask actually.
Sure.
When you're sort of finishing editing a wedding, would you say, okay, this wedding I'm gonna only have alpha style, or could it be a mix and match between your various different styles?
It can certainly be a mix. So the way I edit is, let's say I've got the getting ready part at the wedding and then the ceremony part.
Yep.
So I would not try to mix like certain styles at one setting. So for example, for the getting ready, I would not use alpha and delta and gamma. Mm-hmm. I would try to keep like one style and that part, and maybe then mix it up with a different style for a different setting, different light setup.
Right.
That works. I mean, they kind of are all in the same family of looks, but I would not, for example, if I like do group shots like these ones, I would not do the next one and say alpha and then the next one beta. Right. Just keep like them all together. But you can certainly like mix them up. Even the black and white ones, they all have their reason to be there.
Yeah, for sure.
And so once you like play around with them and test them, you will see like that it certainly works.
Nice, perfect. And a question from Seth. I don't know if this was part of the design consideration, but can you use the styles on a layer? Can you apply them as a layer? I haven't tried myself actually, because I've been mostly just using them as a one-click solution. But I don't know if that's possible.
That's a good question, because I have not been using layers at all.
There you go. That answers your question, Seth. Actually, on my Capture One installation, I'll have to try myself. So, but I think the way you've shown them, and I think because they're quite delicate styles, like a lot of styles can be a bit heavy-handed. Mm-hmm. These, to me, they look quite like nice and subtle. They're not overdone. So in that case, I mean, the main benefit of applying on a style is that you can knock back the opacity a bit. But I think because you've got the soft versions as well, you've kind of got that flexibility there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get another image in here. So this is like an image, for example, where I would always use the gamma one. I'm gonna just hover over the first ones, which doesn't look too right for me. So I would pick the gamma one, and then I would go in there and warm it up first to the point where I think this looks fine. Mm-hmm. This is like sunset settings, so that's where gamma should be used.
Okay. And
I think this works for this image here for sure. Yeah. See the other ones? Kind of not right. But gamma works for.
It lends itself to a nice warm.
Yeah.
Warm
so the thing is,
really, doesn't it?
So the thing is, like the first three ones, they are pretty hard on the yellow tones. So if there's a lot of yellow, like it's pretty much desaturated. And whereas gamma kind of contains the yellow part just to make it look warmer, and that's why it works so good in my mind, like for sunsets and also like blue hour stuff.
Perfect.
It's basically the same light. Get the gamma in there, warm it up, probably slightly brighter, and then it's basically said and done.
Simple.
Okay, it's the same one. I'm just going to use a different one. Let me just click through these for you guys so you can have a look. Let me just apply the alpha first, and then let's warm it up again. And then beta, delta, gamma. So gamma doesn't work here. Different settings. I think delta works quite nice in here. So what Delta does is it actually it's for sure the coolest style in there. And so if you compare these, you can see the wall behind him like completely changes color basically.
Yeah.
And so I think for these ones I would probably use Delta or Alpha, probably even Alpha because that's too much contrast for me in terms of skin tones and the wall behind them. Whereas Alpha, it's basically slightly warm and slightly cool in terms of the wall and the background, and that kind of works.
Question from Hubert, and I think the answer is no.
Okay.
And you might not even know if this feature exists actually. He says, do you apply the styles on a linear response curve?
I have no idea what it is.
There you go. So if you look in your color tool tab, so depends if you've next one across. This one, it doesn't look like you've
No, I've
used
just
the tool.
put everything in here that I use.
So what linear response is? It just gives you like a really flat starting point. But I don't think it would necessarily work super well with styles. It's kind of a bit of a advanced user trick that, as I said, gives you like a really raw starting point, because any raw file from a camera is really flat until the raw converter, like Capture One, for example, applies some kind of base contrast to it. Now that sort of happens automatically in the background, and most people are none the wiser about it. If you want to, you can change to a linear response curve in the base characteristics tool, but the sort of negative impact is that you have to be a lot more careful about protecting highlights and other elements of the image. So I think for most applications it's not really necessary. If you have an image which has a really challenging dynamic range, it might be good, but I think when using styles, I don't think it's really necessary. You're just kind of making more work for yourself, to be honest. So I mean, for myself, I very rarely bother using linear response, so it has a very sort of tiny advantage to some images, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, Hubert. Yeah. So it does change. Yeah, that was a good comment from Victor, who just chimed in on the chat. Oh, hi Victor, by the way. Says it's very similar to flat video profiles like S-Log, so it might work in really harsh light, but it does change the look significantly. So it would probably break a lot of the styles, I would think. So
okay,
yeah,
cool. So let's try to play around with some more black and white stuff in here, because this is like the first image where we have a lot of white, I would say. Just to show you guys that it also works with pretty white, bright images. As again, Omega is the go-to one. And then maybe you can play around, because maybe the windows are some sort of distracting in the background. So you can certainly play around and just like to get rid of the stuff outside.
Yeah, but they all work quite nicely.
Yeah, so this is like an image where I would prefer to use the better one, because the image is so wide and it kind of makes the image look cool for me. So once I apply the better one, it actually casts a soft layer of warm reddish tones over the highlights, which works better compared to the alpha, because the alpha is super cool on this side, as you can see, and the better kind of gets rid of the cool look in here.
Are these all your photos, by the way?
These are all mine, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Okay, let's have another one. Different setting. It's sunrise, and I think I've played around with this as well, and I think for this one, all of these should work as well, as you guys can see. So whenever you got a backlit image, you can certainly play around with the contrast slider and warm it up a bit. Probably the better one. No. Gamma works, yeah, but I prefer the alpha one.
Me too.
Just in case you guys forgot how the raw file looked. There you go. Okay, let's have this one. So this is an edit where I would also go for the gamma one, even though it's not sunrise. The thing is, like as I mentioned, there's so much yellow in here, and the other ones are kind of desaturating it. So you can pick the gamma one. Probably play around with the highlights a bit, just to retain the details in her dress. And then just like maybe add a slight bit of contrast and a slight bit of exposure. And I think that should be fine. And let's just have a look at the raw file. Yeah.
Nice and easy.
Nice and super easy. Let's take the other one. Okay.
Hey, David was asking, he says, it seems to me these styles might be good for street photography, similar to the look I often use for street. I don't know if that's anything you've dabbled in, but
I think so. We're going to go back to this image here.
It's almost street.
it's kind of, at least it's on a street.
It's on a street, yeah.
And so at least you get the colors and the vibe of a street. So you can certainly use these. Yeah, as I told you, it's mostly meant to be used for weddings, but it's also good for portraits for sure. Yeah. Okay, so and this one I would also take gamma because again you've got a lot of yellowish plants or grass on the ground, and as you can see, the other ones are pretty much. Even though alpha also looks nice, I think if I warm it up, yeah, this also works in my mind. Okay, cool. Next edit.
It's nice that you can move so quickly through it.
Sure. Yeah, this is another one where I think everything on one of these would work. As you can see. I think even the black and white ones can come in handy in here, but also, again, Omega is for sure the go-to one. In this case, let's just apply the alpha again, warm it up a bit, and you've got nice, warm, and clean skin tones in this one.
Skin tones, they have to remark, they've been looking very good, actually, because that's often something which lets down a little bit with styles that, it might look good on something other than people, but as soon as skin tones get into the mix, then it tends to break down. But I guess that's been very important for you, that skin looks good.
Definitely, like that's my main thing, or my main reason that I kind of created these in this way, because if the skin tones don't look right for me, I will not end up liking the image.
No.
So they have to be right, and so
excuse me.
So you basically got a good mix of, as I mentioned before, like reddish, magenta, pinky skin tones to more orangey ones with the gamma one. Okay, same
Nadia
image.
was asking if there was any more indoor shots to see how they work on indoor environments too.
Yeah, I'm gonna change to a different setting in a bit. Let me just finish these and then we can go inside.
Okay, great.
Maybe you can jump a bit to the front. Let's just do some quick edits. Okay, basic raw file, apply the alpha, apply the temperature, the Kelvin, and you've got a pretty good grain. Finished image, and next image. So this is kind of indoor. So whenever I'm indoor, I always use window light, if possible. And so same workflow, you apply the alpha and you warm it up. And you've got, I think, a pretty nice and cool edit.
Yeah, nice.
Let's just do these ones first, okay? Just to have a total different light setting. So these are all, this is not flash. So I don't use flash. I just use a video light on my camera.
Ah.
And I'm just going to show you like how these work with, but basically it's the same as flash. It's just a static light source. So as you can see, like the skin tones look even nice in these settings from my mind. Yeah, so I would always go for alpha in this case, or maybe like do the black and white ones, which, yeah, I think it looks cool and timeless.
Definitely.
And yeah, it's a nice classic edit. Another one indoors, same thing. I would prefer the alpha indoors. Maybe adjust the exposure a bit, warm it up a tiny bit, and then you've got a good image. And if we play around with the black and whites again, same thing.
Interesting question from Avars, actually.
Sure.
He said he's asking if the styles are natively made for Canon. So he said, let's say if I use them on Sony shots, would I need to make some major edits? My feeling is no, but I don't know if you've tried it with other raw file types as well.
So I've got Nikon images in here as well, which we can have a look at. So these are from a friend of mine, Jennifer Mower from Canada. She's an awesome photographer. And we've got these indoor ones here. So it's a good question. So it's so I use the Mark IV, and it's definitely built around my Mark IV and Canon tones. But you can also like certainly use these with different camera bodies. You would probably just end up slightly changing the white balance a bit more, or maybe even some tones. But it should work. I'm not sure what you're using, David, but you mentioned that you also use these.
Yeah. I've been trying on Sony and Fuji actually, which are two quite different cameras, really. And I think because, to answer your question, Avar, as well, the way Capture One sort of handles color is maybe somewhat different to other applications as well. So each camera has its own bespoke color profile. And we always try and hit some kind of baseline. Now, of course, different cameras always behave differently, but I think it's also down to the styles creator. Like we said earlier, if you're trying to create styles using white balance edits, then that never ends well when you're working across multiple platforms. But if we're using curves and the color editor and those kinds of things, that makes them a lot more consistent across different brands. So I wasn't aware that you're a Canon photographer. I don't even really sort of consider the format anymore, and this is also something that surprises me when I hear people talking about when I edit my Fuji files I need to do this, or when I edit my Canon files it's a little bit different. I would say to you, treat Capture One as camera agnostic. You should not really have to change its behavior based on the camera brand you're using. So whether it's a NEF, a CR2 or a RAW file or whatever, the behavior should be the same. So
okay. Yeah, so here we are with the indoor shots. So basically this entire session by Jennifer, the first part is shot inside or indoors. And so again, as I mentioned before, if there's a lot of white or white sheets, I would go for the beta just to warm up the highlights a bit. And as you can see, like it kind of works better than the alpha one in this case. Gives like a warm overall look. And I think the skin tones look pretty much fantastic in this one.
Yeah.
And I just removed these again. And even the black and white ones should work pretty fine, like in these kind of settings. There's nice window light coming in from the side. These ones in here. Just go through real quickly. I think the black and white ones come really to shine in these settings, especially like with her style of shooting.
This
Yeah,
is
there's
how everyone looks in the morning, right?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing is like because like her files are so clean and so easy to use.
Mm.
It's basically all for me a one-click edit. Like I wouldn't do much more than just click the style and then I should be fine.
Yeah, it
Keep
looks
it
that way.
keep it easy, keep it simple. Yeah, I like the better one. Just like warming up the entire place. Maybe just bring up the exposure a slightly bit, just to have a nice look. Let's just take some from her from outside. Probably it's this one. Yeah, as mentioned before, if there's too much bright areas or spots, like definitely try to go with the gamma one. But even the delta one kind of works in these settings. Warm it up a tight bit. Looks fine for me. Let's probably take one with a lot of green. And I think you should be able to see like how the greens change from alpha, beta to delta. But also like gamma is for sure like the moodiest one, I would say, and the darkest one, if that makes sense. But these all kind of work in here. Let's just apply the delta. Bring up the exposure a tiny bit, maybe just change a little bit of white balance, and then you've got I think a cool, nice, clean edit. And yeah, like that's how you basically use them. It's as easy as possible.
Well, that's how it should be, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, the whole point of using styles is to accelerate workflow. So if you're trying to apply a style and then fix it, then it's kind of gone beyond what it was meant to do, really. So it should be. And there is many. I mean, you are spoilt for choice in buying styles and presets these days. There is many. Some are good, some are great, some aren't so good. So unfortunately, it's always difficult to test drive them, which is why it's nice to see a demo like this on a bunch of different photos, because then it gives you an idea of how they actually work.
Yeah, true. Maybe I can just show up this image one more time, because I think this image kind of shows like how forgiving these styles are in terms of white balance. So if I like warm it up now, it kind of still works, you know?
Yeah.
I added a lot of warms, but it's still, you've got this nice golden effect in the background from the church, and their skin tones are still super clean, even though like I warmed it up pretty much a lot.
Yeah.
As you can see.
Yeah, no, it still works perfectly. Yeah.
And I think this should also work. Yeah. For all of these.
Yeah.
Cool.
And as I said, it's nice that you have 8 styles, not 80, because you're just paralyzed by choice then, essentially, when there's too many. So it's great to have that mix. Hey, maybe you could apply some grain and zoom to 100%, because I think that would be nice to see how is there any grain on this one. I don't know if it will show up on a webinar transmission. It's always hit and miss. So what's that, medium grain?
Yeah, that's it. I'm not sure. Yeah, sure. This might be a bit blurry in terms of like Skype settings or something.
Yeah, no. It's I'm watching on a sort of test transmission. It's actually pretty good. So I think people watching, you should obviously try the trial and have a play around with grain, because you've got infinite sort of number of settings for it. But it does look really organic, as you said. So it's it's nice.
And I mean you can still like reset it if you don't want to use grain.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
One click away.
Yeah.
And so I hope that this looks nice to all of you guys.
Yeah, and a good last logical question from Rene. He says hello from Germany, Constance. Now your workflow, Lucas, so you apply the style first, and then as we've seen, tweak exposure and white balance and other parameters.
Exactly. So sorry. I would like apply the style when I import the images.
Yeah, so that's another acceleration you can do, is actually apply a style on import as well. You can do it the other way around in Capture One, but I think, like, unless the image was like super over or underexposed, I don't think there's a benefit to applying or fixing exposure first or all those kinds of things. I think apply the style and then do your minor edits.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I try to like get exposure and white balance as much as possible right in camera.
Yeah.
So in the end, like when I edit the wedding and I apply the style first, I certainly just like go through the wedding and I end up with probably just editing, like really editing, like half of the images that I imported.
Yeah.
Because the other ones are probably already good and should be good. And yeah, so just keep it easy and simple. Just try to get it right in camera. That's like the biggest time saver of them all. And if you got a nice clean raw file with good white balance and good contrast and good exposure, it's just a click away to get the perfect edit anyways.
So how long do you typically spend editing a wedding?
Depends on the wedding size, but it's usually, so I kind of like was able to reduce the time this year.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like between 3 and 4 hours right now.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Not days.
No, thankfully not.
No, that's when it gets too much. Well, great. Well, I think that gives us a great indication of what the styles can do. I'm just going to bring us both up on screen, hopefully.
Sure.
Let's see. Yeah, that's both of us. So again, thanks for giving us a tour of what the Reverie Styles can do. I will, for everyone watching, we did record this as well if you joined late and you missed that at the start. So we did record everything, so I will upload that probably sometime tomorrow. You'll get an email in there. You'll get an email roughly 24 hours, which will indicate when the recording goes up. And I'll also put some links in there for the styles and all those kinds of things as well. As usual, future webinars pop up on our Learning Hub as well, which is always learn.captureone.com, where you can find tutorials, guides, webinars, everything pretty much. So, but thanks again, Lucas, for joining us.
Sure.
And it was a pleasure to see how easy it was as well.
Hope it wasn't too easy.
Well, I think that's the whole point. It's supposed to be easy with this. It's making the workflow faster and avoiding having to do lots of editing when you don't necessarily have the time, or as you said, the inclination to do tons of editing as well. Exactly. Yeah, I get tired of editing quite quickly. Actually, if there's a lot. I like editing 3 images and then I'm happy. So anything to speed that up is great. Oh, last question from Nadia. So simple question. It was how to apply style on import. So in the import window, you'll find a little section called adjustments, and that's where you can apply a style. But if you watch the Getting Started videos series we have, it covers all kinds of minor things that you want to do like that. So on the Learning Hub, learn.captureone.com, filter to Getting Started, and that kind of gets you set up with the basics straight away. So great. Thanks again, Lucas.
Cool. You're welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for giving up some of your evening for us. And thanks to everyone for watching. And we'll see you all soon. So take care. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.